Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Property AI Report. This is your weekly digest of all things property and AI, brought to you by me, Mal McCallion, and my good friend and co-host, Matt Goddard. Matt, how are you this very warm weekend?
I'm great, Mal. Unlike Dario Amadei, I've not been at a wellness retreat. So I'm all set to battle with these questions ahead of us.
Yes, you're still looking very, very chill. So, congratulations. Wait for that missive from the government just to rattle you a little bit. Anyway, we have some property news to cover off first. So let us dive in their big shake-up this week in terms of the government's announcement about what it wants to do with the property market. So kind of headlines between now and the end of this parliament, so 2029. They're going to want to consult by the middle of next year, actually 2027, on whether to get estate agents particularly to be qualified. There's going to be loads of stuff around pre-packed sales packs ready for people to sell. It's going to be a little bit closer to the system that works pretty well up in Scotland. And overall, I think it's been pretty well received by most commentators that I can see. Matt, what's your take?
Positive, isn't it? And I know you say there's the political slant that the timelines arrive just before the next election, potentially, right? But I think some people could look at it and say, well, upfront sales packs, we've been there, done that before. But times have shifted as well, right? There's the shift to digital that's a big part of this. And again, you could sort of look at it and say, well, the government is struggling to bring in that side of things for Renters Reform Act. But at the same time, if you don't get started on something, you're never going to deliver it. So yeah, let's crack on and try to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, there is colossal kind of irony / mirroring of, the mid 2000s when hips, as you say, were kind of, a big thing. They came in and then very quickly they were kind of kiboshed. I think that the ground has been sort of, is a little bit more fertile now, isn't it, for that sort of activity? People are less concerned, because I remember back then, the big fear was basically people wouldn't just put their properties on the market because they've got this big, huge, cost up front and effort up front and all that sort of stuff. But I think we have been softened up now along the way with material information, ABC and all that, and people actually being able to discover a load of this stuff up early doors anyway, because of the free availability of information around on the internet and elsewhere. So I think it's broadly positive. I saw one dissenting voice from the conveyancing area. There was one kind of mid-sized conveyancer saying, this is the end of, conveyancing as we know it. It's all bad. What about all the independent firms and all that sort of stuff? But I think that really kind of just highlights that actually, once you make data free, then all of the people whose interest it is to kind of keep it closed off and make the process long, they're going to squeal. So I actually took that as kind of a bit of a positive.
It's also interesting, isn't it? Your dissenting voices stand out. And I know my dad will be throwing stuff at the wireless, which he doesn't listen to some of the wireless, but I just felt like saying that because Bridge McFarlane, the sort of Lincolnshire-based solicitors he worked for, introduced, I think it's called Fast Moves, he'll correct me on that, no doubt, where it was all about upfront sales packs and getting people to engage, and they were getting agencies across Lincolnshire to buy into it. And then you think about people like Complete ASAP, they have an offering that's based around this. So as you're getting a conveyancing quote, actually start putting this together at no fee. And even, is it people like Red Brick in Sheffield? Obviously, with Red Brick, he's able to be very authoritarian and say, this is something we must do. Because I know the challenge does come to that point where the property doesn't come to the market as quick if you're gathering this information first. But actually, if you're in the position where you say, look, you have to do this, and you can run your agency that way, then it actually makes things a lot quicker. And I was talking to one company yesterday where from instruction to completion is currently over 300 days. Now, they are a London agency. You could argue that maybe it's on the market for longer than you'd expect. So being in London, there's a lot more leaseholds. But even so, anything to do that. And as you rightly commented, north of the wall have got these things in place, haven't they? The binding agreements, the upfront home packs.
Yeah.
And you're sorting things out in a matter of days.
And it just works. Yeah, exactly. And then, for a long time, and we've touched on it on this podcast before, it's literally the answer is up there. It kind of works. And yet we're kind of seeing it going, how do we get it below 140 days? It's like, just copy that, mate. So no, I think it's, I do think it is a huge opportunity. I think, for right thinking agents, that they're going to support the qualifications as well, right? Because that's going to actually, it's that important marker of expertise fees. It will shake out some of the less salubrious agents and mean that, that actually probably, like most of the rest of the world, fees will start to climb a little bit because there's recognition that actually these guys are really, really good at what they do. I do think as well it's going to be interesting how how that's kind of going to fit in a little bit with kind of the kind of fees, upfront fee kind of movement as well. So actually, if you are demonstrably doing some work up front and you are actually building these packs and putting them together, then actually charging people for putting the property on the market is probably going to be even more sensible and even more of a kind of a cash flow positive kind of thing as well. So yeah, all of those businesses that have been busy merrily building their kind of pre-sale packs, probably in for some good times coming up. Although I imagine there's going to be some serious consolidation because there's loads of them.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
All right.
And every week there seems to be someone new offering that approach, doesn't there?
It really does. Yeah, and obviously, I think now with this kind of support, I think it's that there will be some. Not that there aren't serious players in there already, but I think there will be some kind of very significantly funded people kind of looking at this now and going, actually, maybe we can start to scoop up some serious business. Although
I think one
there may
final.
well be those.
Sorry,
Sorry,
go
go
on,
on. I was just going to say that there may still be those who are burned by the fact that there were so many kind of hip sort of qualified people who would go out and actually value property and all that sort of stuff, and they were badly burned back in the day. But yes, I'm sure it's going to be different this time around, right?
Well, that was the point I was going to make as well. Is like you think about those naysayers who said it it didn't work last time, it's not going to work this time. I thought of a simile, although albeit in lettings, that back in early 2000s, Foxtons tried to bring direct debits in when there was like a couple of thousand tenancies, and it didn't work. So when we started proposing it towards the end of sort of 2009, 2010, it's like, well, it didn't work for us before. It's like, well, technology had moved on at that stage, not huge, but enough. And so we reviewed it. Actually, at that time, we didn't go with direct debits because of the exposure, and direct debit approach meant that people could claw back the entire sort of term of a direct debit, which is quite a lot of risk. But even so, things then move again. So you should revisit and recheck. And at a time where the capability of technology is shifting and doubling every 4 months, why can't we make this work?
Yeah, significantly. But yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I think we all need to. We're all kind of guilty of kind of going back and going, well, it didn't work last time, so probably going to work this time. But yeah, I think in the age of AI, basically go back and check all of your previous prejudices and decisions because things could be very, very different right now. All right, talking of AI, one of our favourite subjects, we are interested this week to see Graham Norwood reports in the Estate Agent today that there's been a survey out saying that people think that AI will replace Rightmove for property searches, say recent buyers. So this is a poll of 500 homeowners who purchased in the last 12 months, and over a quarter of them say that they could see that essentially AI is going to replace these traditional portals, mainly because they can find out different data that isn't specific to these. They can also probably access the whole of market rather than just the subset that are advertised on these traditional portals. But yes, there's almost 50% of them think that AI will become key in the home buying process. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. So it's a company called UK Property Development who built this out. Matt, what's your thoughts?
Obviously, I'm not saying this because there's someone from my porter kicking around, but that shifts. Everyone should be much more informed, right? And it's a generation where to ChatGPT is replacing to Google. And actually, I found myself foolishly smirking at someone who said, "Oh, I googled that earlier this week." But actually, it's becoming more informed, and it just means that you can personalize that search. There is that still challenge, which I know you'll be working on. That even now, AI is non-deterministic. So if you're asking for something and there's a sufficient level of stock, you'll get different results each time, and you need to evolve. But I actually think a combination of the large language models and the harnesses and the tools those harnesses have will sort of boost people even further. And I actually think this will start bleeding for even more into the process. So not just portals, but some of the skills that negotiators do at the moment, and sort of taking on some of those tasks where it's case you're looking for a 3-bed with outside space in Camberwell. Maybe you can't afford it in that area, but actually go 10 minutes down the road and into the next area, SW9 instead of SE5. Sort of start to actually help with those conversations. But it certainly it's certainly the reason that a lot of these companies are starting to bring AI into their experience, isn't it?
Yeah, and I do think that to your point about the non-deterministic side of things. So essentially, if you do a search for 3-bedroom properties, sea view, near ballroom dancing classes on the south coast, then it'll bring back generally five options for you, which will be absolutely perfect. But then if you ask it again, it will bring back a different five. And part of that is because of this kind of compute crunch, right? It wants to bring you back an answer, and it hopes that those first five are going to be the right answer. But it doesn't take long for you as a property searcher to then start worrying that actually, am I going to see the whole of market? Or do I have to kind of go somewhere else? Without overplaying it, that's obviously what we're solving at My Porter is, 100% of available properties, deliverable properties, and you can find them by basically just by vibe searching, essentially. So yeah, I do think that it's changing already. I think it's going to continue to change. I speak to agents. I've been out on my tour again this week. Bournemouth, Sheffield, various other places.
Birmingham.
Thank you. Yes, as I get stuck on, we were talking earlier on about it, and a couple of others that I've also forgotten from Wednesday. But it's it's increasingly clear that agents are starting to get leads through from ChatGPT and various others, and actually by optimizing their sites and by working with AI companies, you can make sure that actually you're starting to get your name out there, and it's going to be increasingly important. The earlier agents start, again, the earlier you start on this, the more it is going to benefit you. But yes, I think people are very, like you say, that I hear people talking about Googling stuff these days, and it's like, that's kind of moving further. But now I hear people talking about chat GPT and stuff, and that's, that is now the verb. So yeah, I think it's going to change. I think it's going to change a lot faster than many people think. And I think that anybody out there who's kind of listening in, thinking about whether they need to kind of get involved, then now is definitely the time. All right. That is our second story on the property news. Next up, we wanted to talk about interest rates because they have been stuck for this is the fourth time this week that rates have been kind of on hold. Various macro things flying around, like obviously the Iran war, which is now notionally in some kind of ceasefire. But yes, the Bank of England have kind of decided to hold everything steady and just wait and see for another session. Like you, Matt, I'm hearing a lot of agents who are talking, whether behind their hands or out loud, about the fact that the market's a little bit difficult right now. But what's your take on this one?
It's the same time that we saw like mortgage rates are actually coming down as well, right? So it's interesting that it's held, and I know there's a concern around inflation, but there is definitely, I think, it's maybe more London biased in terms of sort of sales prices dropping and sort of engagement in that state, rather than some of the more out of town areas. But it's interesting to see where it goes next, as you touched on. Like the Iran war seemed to be stopped, and then I'm hearing this morning on the news that Strait of Hormuz has been shut again, and how that's going to start impacting oil prices, and then where we go next from there. But I think one thing we didn't really touch on in the summary of the notes is there was a lot of positivity at Property Mark 1 last Friday, and a lot of interest to see where things were going and how things were looking. And I think in every time that things slow down, there's an opportunity for people to focus in on the basics and make sure that they're growing market share.
And yeah, to your point, as I've gone around the country, a lot of the agents that I'm speaking to, and perhaps they're kind of self-selecting as forward-thinking agents who kind of who appreciate opportunity rather than look back at concerns. They broadly around the country seem to be pretty positive about where it's all going to go. So yeah, look, I think it is. It's not quite a kind of two-level market inside London and outside London, but that there are green shoots, I think, of positivity. I think if a ceasefire can hold, and just for a kind of time date check, we're on Saturday morning, 20th of June right now, about 10:30. And yes, there are things change every single day. So who knows what's going to be happening like later on today. We'll talk later about Fable 5, which we touched on last episode. And yeah, literally within about 2 hours of us recording it, basically that was over. So yes, I think that things are changing. I think that the holding this level is fine for now. As you say, mortgage rates do seem to be diverging slightly from that, which is great. But yes, hopefully as we kind of go into the summer and peace kind of steadies, then particularly when we come into the autumn, things are going to start to kick up, and that'll be good for everybody. All right, that's the end of our property news this week. Let's dive into our AI and tech news. Right, and the biggest story, is it the biggest story? Probably. SpaceX, so it's a toss-up between SpaceX and Fable 5. So we're going to go with SpaceX IPO first up. So they did this last Friday, and we spoke about it in the previous episode of the podcast. And yes, it was the biggest ever IPO. Public offering, and it grew significantly, didn't it? And it's continued to go up. So we now have it valued, SpaceX valued at 2.4 trillion, I think, which is insane. Also, it has made Elon Musk the first individual trillionaire, as a result of his shareholding in this particular entity. And there's been various other bits and pieces that have happened around it, right? But yeah, pretty strong news for a business that is, obviously very cool in space, but also it's got a big AI element, hasn't it?
They've done this by the playbook, haven't they, in terms of how to take a business to market. They did all the right signaling, the right sort of conversations. The $60 billion deal with Cursor has been right the way through. And as you say, the money's insane and a bit, I guess, sickening in a way. Musk holds 46% shareholding. So obviously at the 2 point whatever trillion market cap it's at the moment. But when I say they've done it by the playbook, that's in stark contrast to what Anthropic have been up to, right? In our other big headline one. So yes, they've done it. Yes, I think it's going to kick on from there. I'm sure there'll be some normalization, as you sort of talked about off air as well. But I don't think they could have done it much better.
Yeah, I agree strongly. And like you say, they've now said they're going to acquire Cursor, and that in itself is like a huge deal for 60 odd billion, which obviously is now chump change to them, as they've basically got so much cash floating around. So the acquisition of Cursor seems to be this kind of rebuild of XAI. So again, just to recap, Musk a few weeks ago started saying that the XAI, so the frontier model that they built, Grok, with his lab, basically it was built wrong from the start. So actually they need to rebuild it, and all of the co-founders and all of the builders of XAI kind of left. So it seems like they're acquiring Cursor basically to start then this rebuild. They've rented out all the space on their data warehouses, Colossus 1 and Colossus 2, to Anthropic and Google and various others. So yeah, it does seem like this is the precursor to them going hard all over again at this area, and they've got a lot of money to do it. But as you say, moving on to the second story, Anthropic, having almost not put a foot wrong this year, now seem to have found themselves in some serious trouble, and to the point that their most important release this year, pre their IPO, which is expected in the next few weeks, has been pulled by the US government, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it goes all the way back to our Greek beer, doesn't it? When Mythos first came out, and all the sound was, this is so dangerous, we're not going to release it.
Yeah.
And looking back now in hindsight, it's a case of, are you using this as a way of really pumping up the PR around what you are doing?
Marketing.
And exactly, and that negativity, and they've obviously had the battle with the Department of War previously, where it's you can't use us for killing people and internal surveillance and such, and putting almost that holier than thou, we are here to keep the world safe sort of approach. And then if you think about the timeline, 28th of May, they released Claude Opus 4.8 and made big song and dance about that. And then a few days later, they put out a big press release about AI is getting really, really dangerous, and we need the US government to be looking at this. And a video that's only just come out this week, but I think was recorded around the same time, was Dario Amodei going on a show and saying, look, you should have a license to use AI in the same way you need a gun license to use it. Wow. And so it's putting that out just after your biggest, most powerful release. And then for the first time where, we talk about the models swinging punches at each other, and it's I'll put out the latest version of Claude, and then I'll put out the latest version of GPT, and then I'll put the latest version of Gemini. It's almost like this circle of top-rated models just replacing each other at the number one spot. Suddenly, we had Claude Opus 4.8. We had this massive PR release about AI is really dangerous, and the government needs to step in and control everybody, otherwise it's going to get out of hand. And then they released Fable 5 in another matter of days before anyone else could get a new model out. And so what do you expect? Look, the government listened to you. What a shock. Yeah. And what was the other bit that we I said at the start, Darius Amodei, the government called him to say, look, we've heard about these jailbreaks that mean it's really, really risky. You need to call us back. It's obviously I'd live in what the conversation would be. I don't know if they have that sort of Grimsby terminology in there. And they didn't call him back because he was at a wellness retreat, allegedly. And it's you are these companies now, and it's really emotive, but they've got the codes, haven't they? They've got the nuclear codes in a way. And if you have
Abs-
someone that big call you saying we need to speak to you urgently, you don't just go put your another
Carry on yours.
mud pack on or whatever it is you do at a spa retreat.
Exactly that. Put some more water on the on the fire. Yeah, no, it's a crazy kind of moment, I think, and like you say, personalities are getting involved as well. There is again allegedly the U.S. government, Pete Hegseth in particular, who's the Secretary of State for War, particularly hates Amadei because of this. You can't use us for badness, and he's all gung ho for kind of bombing everybody, and so there's personal animosity, and they believe that actually there is a big chunk of this decision that is driven by that personal animosity and the look, you better do what we say because otherwise we'll just close down your models and you're toast. So so there's personalities there. There's also the stuff in the background about Amazon, right, which again is really weird because Amazon is like a huge investor.
Was it 50
in
billion
Anthropic.
just on the latest lot they put into it?
Exactly. So, but Andy Jassy, who is the chief exec of Amazon, with Bezos as chair, apparently it was him that phoned the Department of War and kind of grasped up that they were able to jailbreak this thing.
But again, because he didn't get a response from Anthropic, allegedly, and all of this is obviously gossip and rumors and whatever else. But I think the thing is, and I sort of touched on it with Cursor when we were talking offline. The guy who's selling Cursor for 60 billion is 25 years old. These companies are really quite junior companies that have appeared over the last 2 or 3 years. I don't think they realise just how much power, how much reliance, just whatever the right word, they are underpinning the future, right? And they need to sort of grow up quickly, the right turn of phrase, but realise that, if the government calls you...
Are you feeling like their dad? Come on, kids.
But yeah, do in a way. But also, it sets a dangerous precedent for everyone else, right? When are we going to see... Obviously, ChatGPT 5.5 is really powerful, but are OpenAI going to be reticent about making the next release? Like the hardest part about this control that the American government did at 5:21 p.m. last Friday is they said that non-US citizens could use it. And so it's a case, how do you control that? And there wasn't, right? You said the only way to control that is take it down completely. But also, I was listening this morning to something. They haven't actually filed the correct paperwork to have that mandate in. So they put it in the threat via a phone call, but there hasn't anything passed through Congress to make it an actual thing. So it's like, as you say, it all comes down to personalities, and people, Anthropic need to realise they need to maybe play the game slightly.
Yeah, and again to that point, Amazon again. So this morning are in the news because they've actually pulled so they were supporting the distribution of a film about Sam Altman, which is called Artificial, and has got I think Andrew Garfield in it or whatever. And they were going to distribute it, and now they've done a deal with OpenAI. So they've done a deal with Sam Altman, and now they've gone, actually we're not going to and it's been filmed. Like they closed last summer, and it's due to release the next 6 months or so. And they've gone, no, actually we're not going to distribute it. And it's like these kind of power moves. Amazon is now like the central kind of kingmaker of various things. OpenAI is sitting in the background, like you say, is sitting on 5.5, probably 5.6 is due or 6 soon. But they want their own IPO, right? But they want to probably beat Anthropic to the punch. So all of this is great news for Sam Altman, because now Fable 5 is locked up, Anthropic is persona non grata, and therefore their IPO might be damaged by that. And maybe actually OpenAI can sneak in under the radar and get theirs out and away before Anthropic can. And it's just all these kind of tectonic plate moves and things like that. But what is Amazon doing if they own this much of Anthropic that's worth billions? Who knows? Who knows? I'm sure there's some kind of D chess being played by somebody somewhere. But yes, it's been a big week for the big kind of movers. So the Amazons, the SpaceXs, the kind of Anthropics, and perhaps even to a greater extent OpenAI, just by not being involved.
On the 5D chess, is it Jason and the Argonauts that starts with the gods picking up the pieces and dropping them on the set? I feel
showing your age, mate.
Yeah, no, it's just classic. Is someone moving Sam Altman and Darius Amadei into different spots? But AWS underpins all this, right? They're running on AWS architecture, so they've sort of got some circular revenue coming there because they're basically paying the money that then comes back to themselves.
Yeah, and there is in our list of potential things to talk about, there's an AWS story about AI traffic monetization, right? So actually they're gonna meter the traffic through AWS as well. So it's like, yeah, maybe it was them all along. Maybe it's Bezos. Bezos is actually basically moving everybody around.
Scooby-Doo style.
Exactly right. Yeah. All right. So next up in our AI and tech news. Not to be outdone, Microsoft has decided that this is the week where it's going to introduce a Chinese model for Copilot co-work. And this is Microsoft bringing DeepSeek into their ecosystem. DeepSeek, obviously, one of the big stories from the beginning of 2025, I'm going to say.
Yeah,
Feels like not that long ago.
First reasoning model.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, back when the Omni,
Well, it
the O
wasn't the
model was
first reasoning model, was it? But it was the first one that made it public because we had a O3 out at that time.
Yeah. So it was basically it crashed quite a few share prices at the time by like up to 20% because it was open source and really powerful and shook people's beliefs whether China could actually catch up with America. People suddenly thinking actually yes they probably can. But now DeepSeek is so much it's so much part of the establishment that Microsoft has decided to bung it into to Office and to Windows and stuff like that. So yeah, Matt, being a Microsoft pilled guy, what's your take on this?
Well, there's actually a couple of Microsoft ones, and I didn't manage to drop it into the notes, but this one's interesting because it sort of echoes what you closed out the show with last week, where you were talking about don't just rely on one model. It might be a model for one use case and a different model for another use case, and you don't need the most powerful, most expensive ones for everything. And that's absolutely true. And look at people like OpenRouter, who I met last month, where they're making a living out of. They decide based on what you're asking it, where they route route it out, and then no pun intended, and then return from there. And I was talking to a company this week, right? It's like, why don't we have a version of Gemma 4, Google's open weights model, an open source model, so that deals with most things, and we're not paying cost for that. And then these open source models are as powerful as like even the last point release of like the main foundational labs, right? And I thought this one was interesting because clearly Microsoft were listening to last week's pod, and when Miles made a good point there,
100%.
we should diversify and look at some of these open source models ourselves so that we're not passing through the income. But it's really interesting given the backdrop of everything else happening this week. And the other part I found insightful was Microsoft at their launch just 2 weeks ago now that we had the Worldwide Developer Day from them, and they released a thing called M-Dash, which is a blend of different models. And actually on cyber, it outbeat Mythos on the benchmarking, and it sort of floated under the radar, and it's using different models for different scenarios, but within specifically cyber. I think it's like 6% higher on the benchmarking. So it's like if Mythos can't be released because it's too dangerous, and Microsoft like, hey, over here we've done something. We're just not going to make a fanfare of it. It goes back to that question of was it PR all along, and did the boy who cried wolf got caught out with the whole Fable piece?
Yeah, 100%. And then I mean, to be clear, I use Fable as I know you did at the end of last week, and
it was awesome,
and it is amazing. And when it comes back, it will be amazing. But yes, also, and again to this point, being able to switch things in and switch them out is really important, because and I know you as well, have had projects that I was running on Fable 5 because I'd started them up, and then it said, oh no, you can't use Fable 5 anymore. So you actually had to go and rebuild it in Opus 4.8 because it was plugged into that particular model. So yeah, that flexibility and the ability to unplug and then plug in a new one, I think is going to become one of the most almost critical business decisions that you make, when you're deploying AI in your business, because if you do get stuck on one particular avenue, then you're at the mercy of the kind of the fates that have befallen various models over the last sort of couple of weeks or so. So yeah, that's a bit of Microsoft and Chinese models. And as part of that as well, Matt, you saw this story about Sakana AI, which is another model just launched, which has, not content with deep research or heavy deep research, we've now got ultra deep research, right?
Well, that's it. And it just shows that the rate at which things are getting churned out, right? That this is Tokyo-based AI startup, and just the speed that they go in, and it can run for what is it, 100-page reports plus in 8 hours, which you'll then need another model to distill that down into an executive summary. But
absolutely,
the speed and power of things coming out, as I touched on earlier, at Sash last month, they said capabilities doubling every 4 months, and you can absolutely see that now with the things that are the options. Obviously, you wouldn't use this just for saying what we're going to have for my lunch, but if you're doing some market analysis or something similar, then it's ideal, right?
You have to be really serious though about what on earth you were doing, because 100-page reports, I'm sure, are going to be great for some people, but yeah, it's not necessarily, as you say, for the for your daily digest of the news, is it? So yeah, no, there's so much happening out there, and just for clarity, I do recognise that Tokyo is not based in China, as I tried my segue from China to Sakana, but yes, the models from Asia and elsewhere, that are now really starting to kind of kick in and make a difference, and others will be following this particular these styles of build. And yeah, I'm sure it won't be long before we see some ultra deep research in various other models as we get through. All right, final story in our AI and tech news. I just wanted to touch on, because as we know, I do love a good AI video. Grok Imagine Video 1.5 is with us, and the claim is that it tops the video leaderboard. For full disclosure, I haven't tried it, but it looks pretty good. The samples that they've put out are always like amazing, because they're always the best samples. Again, regular viewers will know that I'm currently in love with Sea Dream 2.0. But yeah, this looks very much like it's probably going to get run out sometime this weekend as we kind of build out the next sort of marketing for our business.
What else would you do in 28-degree heat, Mal? Sit and to run through some AI video models.
Shut the curtains, lock all the doors. Going down, going deep. But yes, no, it should be. Yeah, that will be my fun for this weekend. All right, that is our AI and tech news. Let's move on to our tool of the week. Matt, this is something that you've been playing around with, and it looks like it's really good.
Yeah, so Replit was one of the, I suppose, it didn't start as a vibe coding platform. It actually started a long time before vibe coding was even a thing. But Replit's, alongside Lovable, probably one of the two main vibe coding platforms. And what's happened this week is it's now available within Claude, and so actually you're not having to hand off to a different app and then work on something and then bring the code back in. It's all a seamless transition, and I think this is pertinent timing at a time where Codex has launched Sites, which is basically OpenAI's equivalent of vibe coding, and you can spin up sites instead of presentations. You can spin up web apps to do anything you really want. So, and to see this work through. But I wouldn't be surprised, if this is a connector that works really well to hand off between Claude Code and Replit when you're building things. But I wouldn't be surprised if Anthropic build into Claude's actual vibe coding anyway, and take Claude Design and vibe code it into being something itself. So I think that's probably days away, if not weeks.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the danger for all the kind of businesses that are building around one particular kind of product, is actually when the large language models themselves go, that looks like something we can probably do now. And they just crack on and do it. So yeah, I think it's so even I've got a Replit account, which is like crazy, because I've never been a full-on coder, but yes, it's incredibly useful. And now to be able to kind of plug it straight into Claude is going to be very very helpful in terms of what we're trying to do here as well. All right, that is all we've got time for this week. Thank you very much indeed for listening in. We will be back next week with plenty more property and AI news, and who knows, even maybe Fable 5 will be back by then for us to play around with a little bit more. But Matt, thank you also for being there as ever. Have you got a busy weekend on the cards?
My little middle brother's birthday, so we're heading over to Twickenham for tea, which will be fun to see the family. What about yourself, Malcolm?
To little Matt. It's Father's Day tomorrow, so yeah, we've got some escape room action and then some pizza. So yeah, should be good fun. All right, well listen, thanks again for listening, everybody. We will catch up with you again in 7 days' time.
Take care, Rob.